When the Amarillo Symphony called and asked me to write a piece of music based on the Paladuro Canyon, I was absolutely fascinated. I knew it would be a great challenge. I had absolutely no idea what really lay ahead. I think that everyone who has ever seen the Paladuro Canyon goes through that sudden feeling of awe that after having been across the plain, and it's all very level, well, occasional undulations, but basically very level. And then there's this first little swoop, and then the whole bottom seems to drop out of everything. I remember I was so impressed with that when I first saw it, and I think everyone talks about that, their first time to have seen the canyon. Overwhelming, and it seems at this moment extremely audacious to even try to capture this in a piece of music. It's a very humbling experience to set a composer out in such vastness as this and say, right. Very humbling. But then, just as you feel you can't do it, the wind rustles, and there are sounds, and there will be sounds. The creative process is so interesting to observe. Where does the creative idea come from? I think it's captivated people for just forever, you know, how it happens. In the case of this piece, it was so surprising to me. The first time I saw the canyon was overwhelming, and then I was filled with questions of how will I ever think of something to write to express this. I went to bed that night in the hotel room there in the Harvey in Amarillo, you know, mulling this question over, knowing that I wanted to create some kind of a theme that expressed this feeling of the walls going up of the canyon that way, and it had to reflect the grandeur of the expanse, but I wanted it also to give some feeling of simultaneous going up in different directions, and how to do that. I woke up the next morning aware that I was hearing the sound, hearing the answer to that. Well, this is what I wrote there on the spot. And it's an interesting thing. The idea was to create this simultaneous expansion in different directions. They both go up, of course, the two walls of the canyon from the floor. Well, that wouldn't work, and this is what my subconscious during the night realized, that, well, you can't make them both go up because then you don't have the wedge. One has to mirror the other, and so one voice goes, the other voice goes the other way, and I was hearing in my head this. That was the canyon, you know. I wrote that down. It kept going. And I said, my gosh, there's the canyon. You know, and as I say, I wrote it down. And the question remained in my mind, well, is this really, can I use this in the piece? Is it really real? And somehow I needed to test that. And then when I came back to the canyon in December, one cold Sunday morning, I went to the amphitheater and totally alone, and just looked around and imagined, you know, what it's going to be like at the premiere. And then I walked back behind the stage and back into, you know, where that magnificent scope of canyon side rises behind, you know, what a backdrop. And I climbed up about half or two-thirds of the way up there. And all the time, just resounding in my head was what I just played. And I was testing to see if it really seemed real, if it made sense, if those sounds were really in harmony with the canyon as I was experiencing it, rather than just as I had remembered it the next morning. It was real. Yeah, it was real. In one of his celebrated conversations with Bill Moyers, the noted philosopher, mythologist, Joseph Campbell, said, "Every land should be a holy land. One should find the symbol in the landscape itself of the energies of the life there." That's what all early traditions do. They sanctify their own landscape. The sanctification of the local landscape is a fundamental function of mythology. When Bill Moyers asked Campbell, "Who interprets the divinity inherent in nature for us today?" Campbell answered, "It's the function of the artist to do this. The artist is the one who communicates myth for today. The function of the artist is the mythologization of the environment and the world." That passage absolutely inspired me the first time I read it. I had just gotten the commission from the Amarillo Symphony to compose the Paladero Canyon. It made me jump out of my skin. It made me realize how much bigger this commission was than just me as an individual composer, because I was functioning as such an artist to help the people of this area realize in a certain way the feelings that they have. The feelings run so deep in this area for their land and for this canyon. It means a great deal to them. And I knew that it was going to be incumbent upon me to try to express these deep feelings and write a piece of music that does indeed say something about how the people feel about this canyon. What I hope to capture in this composition, actually I hope that it reflects lots of different things on different layers, and I hope that one layer that one could just listen to the piece and not be aware of anything else that has gone into it, and still just simply enjoy it right on its surface. And that's what I hope to bring about. But there are other things that I want to put into it. I want to come to Amarillo this May, which will be a full year before the performance, and almost to the day at the same time, for a couple of reasons. I want to see the canyon in the springtime and get the feeling, as I've seen it now in late summer and in the early winter, late fall, early winter. I want to see it at that time of the year. I'm sure the colors will be different and the feel will be different. But I also want to literally be there, to sit in the amphitheater at the very hour that the performance will take place a year hence, to know where the sun sets, to have some feeling for what the sounds are. I believe, the way the piece is taking shape now, that it would be marvelous if the sun were still shining and if we could see the canyon as my piece starts. And I hope that by the time those 20 to 30 minutes have elapsed, that we'll be able to see the stars, because I would like the piece to end, in a sense, like going back out into the universe. We like started coming in from the universe into the beginning of the geological time, which is the Earth, and then I'd like to go back out to the stars. I love teaching, and have taught for not all of my professional life. There was a big span of time where I conducted full-time. The one thing that I have done all my professional life, and even all the way back to my childhood, is compose. I've spent about half of my career as a composer and about half as a conductor. For me, it was very important to the experiences of making music, actually. I think quite frequently modern composers focus too much as just writers and not as performers, and the great composers of the past were most often performers too. Some of my most outstanding and most formative moments have been as a performer.
This is one of the most exciting things for me as a performer, to be able to talk to the composer. I mean, there have been many times I wish Beethoven or Brahms were sitting right there, and I could have said, "What did you mean by this?"
Why did you write this crazy note?
And reading through your score for the first time, the thing that struck me particularly strongly was that this is music, has a great variety of character in it. There's a sense of uneasiness, a sense of power, a sense of lyrical beauty, all kinds of things that I noticed in that music.
I wanted the piece to be a kind of a progression on several different levels. And one of those levels was a kind of a progression of mankind's interaction through the eons with the canyon. The vast plains is what I wanted to capture in the very beginning of the piece. The wind, and then everything is on a table, a D, a pedal D. And little undulations. And there's tiny little undulations, and it goes on and on and on and on. And then it seems like that keeps... And then you sense little scurryings of, animals or people. My own feeling is that it's like life beginning to come on this vast table. And then all of a sudden, after that's been going on for a while, as you know, the woodwinds come in, and then you sense like the bottom is about to fall out, and then the next time the bottom does that and goes all the way. And that's the moment you see the canyon for the first time.
And at that point, you introduce, for the first time, one of the really important themes in the piece, which is played by the brass, really full out, sort of heroic, amazed character.
Yes. And that's when you're on the edge, looking out over, you've just been on this little table, and all of a sudden the bottom drops out, and there's a 100-mile wide canyon, for God's sake. And the grandeur of it, and the distance, and the vision, the color, all of this comes out in that opening horn theme. Then the music goes down with this decided descent through the whole orchestra, then to the very depths, the lowest pitches possible. And at that point, I think it will be somewhat unmistakable not to feel a sense of slow, plodding prehistory. I decidedly had in mind, actually, the quartermaster foundation, which is the bottom, the heavy red the floor of the canyon. And then at that spot in the music, and we're still in the first movement, it comes up level by level through the geological ages. And the music changes as a result. There's even one spot where the music kind of cascades downward. And I deliberately had in mind the very striking formation of the Spanish skirts, which is where the quartermaster meets the next level, the Tecovas level. The next level up above that is the Trujillo formation, and that's the top of the canyon where the rocks are so hard. I'm considered by my compositional colleagues to be a very conservative composer, maybe even old-fashioned. On the other hand, I think when the general audience hears a piece of music of mine, they won't think it's conservative at all. You know, I use a certain amount of dissonance, but I always use that just for expressive purposes. Basically, my music sings, and it's just a deep tenet of faith for me that music must sing, and music must not be afraid to sing. But this second section represents the next big stage. I personally think of it as kind of the Garden of Eden stage, when humanity is now present on the face of the earth, kind of a period of innocence, a very pastoral kind of feel, and at the end of every phrase, the low quartermaster formation music answers kind of ominously in a kind of a quasi-chorale, to just remind us that it's innocent maybe, but not the world is not that simple, and nothing is ever that simple, and the progression of nature is always present, and it is to be considered and to be reckoned with and can't be ignored. And I think that the presence of that bass quartermaster formation chorale transforms what would have been just a simple Age of Innocence type movement into the counterpoint between that feeling of innocence and always the possibility of nature dealing a terrific blow. The third movement, or the third section, focuses on the Indians and the original Native Americans and how they interacted with this land. There are, in fact, two Indian themes in the piece, and I did want to work in some way, work on direct Indian quotes from Indian themes into it, because the canyon was so important to the Indians, all of the Indians, but particularly to the Comanches. You know, the Comanches felt that the canyon was the place, was the birthplace, or it was how buffaloes came to be born. That the buffalo was somehow spawned from the Mother Earth in the canyon, and it's quite touching. They were, as I understand it, they were never worried that the white man could kill off all the buffalo, because the canyon is there and will always produce more buffalo. So it was a very sacred place to the Indians. Then the violins are used to suggest the music of the settlers, the white settlers. And of course one sensed the two vying for the space and the time, and a certain struggle between these two. They alternate and alternate, and finally actually are superimposed as they struggle for the dominance. And then that's when, all of a sudden, bam, bam, all of that tension and strife between humanity is in a sense interrupted, and we're reminded that the canyon, and the canyon is of course a metaphor for the earth itself. The earth is here, the earth was here first, the earth will be here long after, and And that's the thing to be remembered. And when that happens, then we are ushered back into the music of the first of the opening, which is, of course, a return, a recapitulation in the sense of a sonata form, or it ushers in the last movement if you're thinking of the analogy of the symphony. And both the opening canyon theme and also an allusion to the Garden of Eden type, that's probably a wrong or inept metaphor, but nonetheless it seemed to be working, so let's use it. Both of those appear in succession, and then the music becomes very, very quiet as an extended coda comes into play. And the image I had here was of what it was like to just lie on your back in the canyon at night, because now we've made the progression from the earliest of times through the midday to the evening, and now it's dark. And of course the skies are so wonderfully clear up there, and looking up and seeing the stars, that's what I had in mind at the ending. And you know, we've all had the experience of contemplating what those crazy stars are doing. I mean, how incomprehensible it all is, how insignificant the Earth seems in the face of the universe, those silent stars, and for even longer than our solar system, much less our Earth. And how can it all be, and what's our place in all of that vastness? Those are the thoughts that very much were in my mind as I wrote the ending, and I believe it creates a feeling of just absolute floating and of contemplation.
The character of this music is supposed to be like little beginning scurryings of life. He says it's supposed to be busy and uneasy.
No problem.
You will be uneasy, but very, very quiet. 1, 2, 3. No, just play bum ba dum. I asked him if he wanted every note, and he said no. It's more a sweeping effect, but I need the first note. Really fortissimo. Okay, Deodorium. Okay, it can't be sort of mezzo forte. That would ruin the effect. Right. 6. 32. 3. Hold that.
Hearing one's own music is, of course, an unbelievable experience. One of the things that I take great pleasure from is before the concert, hearing the musicians warming up and practicing the difficult little patterns, and hearing the little patterns not together into the piece. That's always been a big kick for me. But then comes the moment when the piece takes shape, and it's just a wonderful experience.
And it's very important that it be stopped so that when the canyon theme comes, you know, you really knock us out, as it did, yeah. Just at the limit of what you can play at horns and trombones. I know it's going to be hard to get it, but it's getting better and better each time you play it. 11, and that place is where the basses and the cellos It should be bum, bum, dee, bum, kind of leaning and lumbering, tom, bum, dee, 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 dee. Now it's too much, bum, 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 dee, dee. You know what to do. And it's sounding great. Thank you.
It's a curious thing when you're hearing it the first time. It's a total overwhelming rush. How it's working, a thousand individual things you're remembering as you were scoring it. Yes, this worked, this worked. A few moments, oh, I need to make an adjustment here, or they need to change this there. But overall, it's a wonderful feeling. The great Texas novelist Larry McMurtry said about this canyon something that was very arresting to me. He said, "What is undeniable is the power that this canyon has to arouse in us a sense of the long, long movements of time, a sense, if you will, of the eternal." And it was that sense of the eternal and of the long, long movements of time that I wanted to be sure that this piece captured.